Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to The Takeout. Let's talk about Tomahawk missiles. The United States invented them in the 1980s when Cold War tensions with the then Soviet Union ran high. The Tomahawk has a range of 1,000 to 1,500 miles, flies about 100 feet off the ground, and was designed to evade Soviet air defenses of that time. It was, then, another lethal chess piece in the Armageddon arms race. Tomahawks serve another purpose now, as weapons, for example, against Houthis in Yemen. Easily more than 200 have been fired at them in the past 2 years. Also, a Navy submarine fired 30 at Iran's Fordo nuclear facility as part of Operation Midnight Hammer in June. The U.S. fires most Tomahawks from ships or submarines. There is a Tomahawk land version, though its testing and platforms are not nearly as developed as those in the U.S. Navy. This brings us to Ukraine. President Zelenskyy, who met with President Trump at the White House today, very much wants Tomahawks. A map shows why. Ukrainian drones can and have hit Russian infrastructure targets, but missiles with a range of up to 1,500 miles open vastly more of Russia to potential attack. Tomahawks are very hard to detect, harder still to destroy in flight. As a weapon to punish or deter, Tomahawks would give Ukraine many more options than it has now. Trump has been coy about providing Tomahawks. That coyness, which may harden into resolve, has led Russian President Vladimir Putin back to talking with Trump. Hence this conversation that sprouted this week about another Trump-Putin summit soon in Hungary. Transparently, it appears, a Russian effort to delay and possibly short-circuit deliveries of Tomahawks from whatever source, U.S. or others. Now, about the possibility of Ukraine being able to strike deep within Russia today, Trump was the picture of coyness. Listen.
Would your administration allow Ukrainians to strike deep into Russia?
We're going to be talking about that. That's something we'll be talking about. You're right. It's an escalation, but we'll be talking about that.
Talking, as we all know, is not the same as doing. And Zelenskyy craves shipments, not words. For more on all this, we turn to Willie James Inman in West Palm Beach, Florida, where the president will be spending the weekend. Willie James, great to see you. Lots to dissect in terms of the Trump-Zelenskyy interaction. We have been schooled in the art of demeanor evaluation, so let's start there.
Hey there, Major. Good to be with you from West Palm Beach, Florida. Well, it certainly was an interesting meeting. Both leaders sitting down at the table is a huge contrast to what we saw earlier this year when that Oval Office meeting between Zelenskyy, the president, and the vice president just spiraled out of control. Now, of course, top of mind for Zelenskyy is getting security guarantees from the United States and getting those Tomahawk missiles. That long-range capability could perhaps help change the calculus of this war. But, of course, that is certainly something that is on the table, but not something that is necessarily approved by the President of the United States. And he mentioned himself that this could potentially escalate things, and the Russians could certainly see things that way. But nonetheless, Zelenskyy pushing forward after this over 2-hour phone call between President Putin and President Trump, where they agreed to not only meet again, but discuss the ending of the war. Zelenskyy is trying to put forward his needs and his wants to make sure that his country is supported, while President Putin is perhaps playing games, some experts could warn, with President Trump. And Trump was asked about that exact instance if President Putin was trying to buy time, and he said that that was possible, but he also said that Putin and Zelenskyy both want peace, even though Zelenskyy said that is certainly something that President Putin does not want.
Zelensky's demeanor was important in that meeting as well. I want to play for our audience sound from the Ukrainian president directed at President Trump. Let's listen.
My congratulations with your successful ceasefire in the Middle East.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you did it. And I think this is the momentum to finish Russia's war against Ukraine. I think that, yes, we understand that Putin is not ready. I think not ready, but I think that I'm confident that with your help, we can stop this war.
Clearly, the Ukrainian president complimenting President Trump and soliciting what he hoped to get back, which was some yes agreements. And that fusion there is something that the Ukrainian president clearly wanted to achieve.
Yeah, that's right, Major. I think he learned from his past interaction, as I mentioned earlier this year, that Oval Office meltdown, if you can call it. Certainly, President Zelenskyy has learned from that. He's learned from other world leaders that you really have to compliment President Trump to perhaps soften him up a little bit to get what you want. In this case, he wants some major arms from the U.S. for his nation to further push back against that Russian aggression.
Willie James Inman, West Palm Beach, Florida. As always, thank you, sir. I'm joined now by former United States Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Bill, always a pleasure to have you. Help my audience understand the Tomahawks, the potential difference they could make, and whether they need to come from the U.S. or possibly some other source.
Major, you bring up a good point. President Trump talked about limited number. I'm not sure there are limited numbers. I think actually, as you pointed out, we've been manufacturing these and actually using them since the 80s. Been a lot made, and a lot have been exported. So there are other nations that have them in their inventories. And those could be, if President Trump were to say, go, that could help it as well. Just the threat, just the possibility of providing those Tomahawk weapons to the Ukrainians has apparently, as you've just reported, gotten Putin's attention, asked him for, he requested this phone call yesterday because he's worried about Tomahawk. So this has a lot of pressure. This can be pressure on Putin.
And as I mentioned, the value is not just to attack, but to deter, to say we have them, and you should be aware of that. That possibly, if it were to happen, and it hasn't happened yet, not entirely balance things, but give something Ukraine doesn't currently possess to send a signal to Russia.
You're exactly right. It's two things. One, it can disrupt. Those kinds of strikes deep into Russia can disrupt attacks from Russia into Ukraine. But also, after some kind of cessation of fire, there needs to be the deterrent that you're talking about. And if the Ukrainians have that capability, and Putin knows they've got, that's a deterrence. That's what deterrence is.
How would you say, and how would you characterize, Bill, the atmosphere right now, Ukraine and the Trump administration?
As you've pointed out, much better. Much better. They've actually, it sounds like they respect each other. Right. It sounds like there's some good conversations going on there. President Zelenskyy recognizes that he needs the United States. He needs Putin. But he also recognizes at the same time that they need to put together their own capabilities. Right. The Europeans are the same place. Europeans know that their Americans may not be here forever. But they need us now. They need the Americans right now. They need to be developing their own capabilities, defense industrial, military capabilities, and so they're working in parallel.
One other thing the president raised today, and he talked about it throughout the week, that India, according to what he said, will no longer purchase Russian oil. We don't know if that's a fact, but the president is asserting that. That's another pressure point.
A big pressure point. Pressure on Putin is going to be key, and we've already talked about the Tomahawk pressure. The money flowing into the Russian economy, into the Russian treasury, that's keeping the war going, comes from oil and gas exports. And if the Indians, who are either the first or second largest purchaser of Russian oil, if they go down, if they stop or go down, that has a big effect on the revenues going, and has an effect then on Putin's ability to push the war.
The Kremlin always puts out its own statement about these phone calls between Putin and Trump. In its summary yesterday, it said Tomahawks would not change the contour of the battlefield at all. That tells me they're assuming that the ground-based firing of Tomahawks is at least some period of time away, because, as I mentioned, those capabilities are less well-developed than sea-based deployment of Tomahawks. Or it could just be a flat-out lie. But the one thing the Kremlin did say is any Tomahawks in Ukraine would fundamentally alter the future of U.S.-Russia relations. How do you translate that? How do you interpret that?
I pay very little attention to what the Kremlin says. Very little. The relationship is going to be determined on how this war ends. If President Trump puts the pressure on Putin to end this war, like they're talking about doing, then the relations can develop after that. Right now, there are no big relations.
None at all. Ambassador William Taylor, always a pleasure. Bill,
Pleasure,
great
thank
to have
you.
you. Thank you so very much.